Is this real? Or is this just a ride? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? It's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Why are we here?
I think we're part of a greater wisdom than we will ever understand. A higher order. Call it what you want. Know what I call it? The big electron. The big electron. The big electron. It doesn't punish, doesn't reward. It doesn't judge at all. It just is, and so are we. For a little while. The ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud. Don't worry, don't be afraid, it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love.
Greetings, programs, and welcome to another edition of Red Pill Sunday School here on UCY.TV. I'm Clint, your host, on this Sunday, October 1st, 2017. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'd like to also just offer out my incredible, heartfelt thanks to those who've donated to me to continue to do this work that I've been doing, this writing and these books that seem impossible to finish. But geez, I'm getting there. But I wanted today to especially thank those people. I can't tell you what it means to me to be able to do this and have just that little bit of money come in to get me through these days. It's an incredible feeling, and it makes me feel useful, I suppose. And that's very important for an aging man like myself. So I want to. I'm going to give you a legal lesson today, folks. Today we're going to learn about the birth certificate. And I know there's a lot of things out there, a lot of rumors, a lot of patriot mythologies, a lot of things that just aren't true when it comes to the birth certificate process. Why do we do it? How did it start? What's its purpose? What's really happening when the mother fills out the vital statistics of her baby, of her property, and thus puts it onto the the vital statistics record? It gets registered as an event, a legal entity, and the rest is, of course, each of our history collectively as we confirm the process. Now, confirmation is a thing that we'll get to towards the end because, well, I hope, because that's the process of how we actually end up becoming the straw man or bail and surety for this person. So I want you to understand one thing and one thing only before we move on. There is only one thing that you need to know, and that is simply that your child, your procreation, creation being the key word, is your only property. Okay? That's it. That's all I need you to know. That is your only property. It is the only thing that you can truly call your own. It is the only man, be it female or male, that you have control over morally, spiritually, lawfully, etc. That's it. That is the one thing. And with that great, great privilege, that great, wondrous beauty of being a father or a mother, you also have an incredible duty. You're duty bound to take care of that offspring, that issue, that infant. All these different words that we need to go through. So that is the one caveat, the one thing you must know before we proceed today. It is the one thing that you have been given the privilege to truly create almost out of nothing. Almost, not quite. So if we start off with that precedent, that foundation, and we come to an understanding that, yes, the word property perhaps sounds almost cold or like a word that should be a different word, the paternal rights or these all things. But I want you to understand that the property, the word property, in its truest sense, its natural sense, is what I'm referring to. I don't mean that you have a legal deed or title or any paper or words, for that matter, at all. I'm talking about blood. And above all else, the law recognizes blood. Now, the whole concept, the whole idea of the birth certificate process is, in fact, to destroy the lawful recognition of the bloodline of any family. Now, I want you to understand that only in this country, the United States, as well as we'll put it to you this way, we're all familiar with the genealogy of the royal family, i.e. the landholders of the United Kingdoms, your Spain, your Portugal, your England, your Ireland, your Scotland, your France, your Rome, etc., Italy. Right? We're all familiar. I mean, there's somehow that's open out. Everybody knows it. How can you not know it? But for some reason in America, we think that we're somehow different. We think that even though the founding fathers were, of course, the cousins, the royalty of America, the cousins of the king, George Washington, of course, being a direct offshoot, and Barack Obama being a direct descendant of the kings of England. Direct, not cousin, but direct. I want you to, and that goes for every president, please understand that, because that's why they're president. They are of the royal family. You think that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump aren't related? Of course, they have the same grandmother. I've covered this. It's in my book. You must understand the importance of blood when it comes to the ability to inherit land. If you have no blood recognition in the law, you're not of the posterity of the people, the families that created these kingdoms, these nations, these countries, these states. If you're not of their bloodline, or at least if you are somehow tainted of that bloodline, corrupted of that bloodline, well then suddenly you become a vassal, you become a serf, you become a nothing in the eyes of the law. That is the whole purpose. Now, it is also very important to understand that the Constitution of the United States is, even Barack Obama even said this, and nobody understood what he said. Not even Alex Jones, the idiot. He called Obama an idiot for saying this, but in fact, it was probably one of the most honest and true things that Obama ever came out of Obama's mouth, because he is a constitutional attorney, and what he said was simply that the Constitution is a document of negative rights, a doctrine, if you will, of negative rights. Now, in other words, it doesn't apply to most people. the common people, the goyim, the people of the nations, you and I, citizenships of the United States, or maybe you call yourself a national and you think that actually means something other than being of the nation. Well, whatever it is, whatever status, i.e. person you receive, whatever straw man you're wearing, if it comes from the United States, well, sorry. Whatever your flattering title is, which of course the Bible is against all flattering titles, and that includes citizen, well, I don't know what to tell you. So, you have to understand that the Constitution is in place only to protect those men or those persons with a certain status whom have done one thing and one thing only, and that is reserved all rights. Now, when you become a citizen, you go into contract, you lose all natural rights, you lose all of the things that the Constitution protects against, because you're now in servitude, voluntary servitude, to that very government. How can you possibly claim to be under the rights and privileges of a United States citizen and also declare that you've reserved all rights? That's just not possible. You have obligations to the United States because you are its citizen. This is how it works. This is the whole point of making you a citizen through the birth certificate process. Okay, those who have reserved all rights, those who are quote-unquote citizens of the private states, the 50 states who are united and meet as Congress assembled, that is a completely different story. Those people, those men, have reserved their rights, or better to say, they have given fealty and allegiance to the 50 states in compact, but have not given up all their rights. And this is so important. That is the opposite of a public citizen, a private citizen. So how do you make someone go from privacy, from being, as we've always known it or called it, one of the actual people, which a citizen of the United States is not, but those private people who are protected by the negative rights of the Constitution. In other words, and let me tell you what that means, just so there's no confusion. Constitution says government cannot do this. You ever notice it doesn't really say what it can do as much as it does cannot. So you've got certain things listed, and what does it say? That everything else is reserved. So what rights are given up in the Constitution are clear, and then of course the Bill of Rights is that bill of negative aspects. For instance, the right to bear arms, which we're all taught like idiots to think that means guns. What that in fact means is heraldry, arms, bloodline. Probably one of the most important lessons that you can learn right there is to give up on this idiotic notion that the right to bear arms actually means guns. It is a capitalized word in the Constitution. It is a capital, and when you're talking about arms, heraldry, the family shield, the family bloodline, arms is, of course, capitalized as it is in the Constitution. The right to bear arms, my friends, in other words, the right to bear your bloodline is what gives you the right to bear little arms, as in guns, protections, that sort of thing. You see, what you've missed, what you don't realize, is that if I'm a private citizen, a private person, then I can defend myself. I don't have laws. I haven't given up that right. But as a U.S. citizen, you have no right to do that unless you're told you can, unless you are granted that right to own a gun. Why? Because you're participating in a person of the United States, a status of the United States, i.e. a citizenship, a vessel in commerce, and it is not you who are bearing the guns, excuse me. You're bearing the arms of the United States, which is its flag and seal. Don't believe me? Look it up. Look up flag and seal of the United States. It'll tell you it's the arms of the United States. The right to bear arms. You see, once you give up that right, that Second Amendment right, which is why they specifically declared that you cannot take that right away except voluntarily, of course. You see, the militias were there to protect the state, to protect the family, to protect the neighbors, to protect the towns against the encroachment of a national government, a king, a kingdom, a central government. That was the idea of a militia, and this is why it says the militia is so important in the Second Amendment. And therefore, we always reserve the right to form our own militias as state citizens, not national citizens. A state citizen is not a national. A private citizen of the state, a state, is not a citizen of the United States. So, with that bit of understanding, again, one, your child is your property. It is to the blood of your child that the law recognizes all inheritance to go. You don't need a will. You don't need to exclaim. The law presumes always that the inheritance will go to the blood. The only reason that anyone could need a will, why do you have to go leave a will to make sure your children get your inheritance? Or they don't get your inheritance, whatever floats your boat. Why do you have to do that? Well, because the law does not see your child as your property. It is not your blood that it sees because you abandoned your child at birth. That is the idea. That is what is called delivery. Delivery means abandonment. Abandonment means delivery. To set free. Okay? So, it's a relinquishment of duty, in other words, of parentage. You see, instead of declaring your power of paternal rights, you're declaring, and actually the correct word we'll get into is informing, that you're abandoning your child. You're abandoning your paternal rights and in turn giving guardianship. But you're making the child a ward of the state. This is why the state can take your children. This is why you're so damn confused why the state has so much power over your children. But you see, they don't. What the state has power of is the legal entity created at birth from the vital statistics of the child. That is what they have power of. And as long as you can be made to believe that that is a true statement, that your baby, your property, is actually property of the state because he's operating and you're putting him into school and getting all his records and everything in that legal name, that full name, where the surname takes over the Christian name, the first name, the family name. When you start calling that child by that name, signing in its name, getting it insurance, registering it for school, all of that stuff, that's use. You are using the status, the person that was created by that birth certificate, that legal entity, and therefore the state claims the right to take its property. What is its property? The person of the child. The vital statistics that were created to invent from that record of a birth event and vital statistics a legal entity. Remember, the creator controls. Who creates the person? The state. The status, right? The citizen. Who's the creator of that? That's the state, or the district, if you will. But, remember, who's the procreator? Who's the one that created the life, the reality, not the fiction, not the legal garbage, not the statistics. These are all man-made things. You are the creator in this case. The creator controls according to law, therefore you control your property. But see, you've given up the paternal right through this process of confirmation and ratification of the name. Again, we'll get to that if we have time. Now, I'm going to give you the rundown. Hopefully that explains in a nutshell what's happening. I know that's a lot of information to take in. I cover it in triplicate in my book. Again, that's called Straw Man, The Real Story of Your Artificial Person. It's free to download, strawmanstory.info. That's the website. Strawmanstory.info. If you want to know what all of this is, between that book and the next one that's going to be coming out, it's going to be explained to you. Today I want to go over these terms. I want you to know what you've done, what your parents did to you without comprehension. That is not that they didn't have understanding, because remember, when you understand, that means you stand under the authority of something. Doesn't mean, nor are you required to have comprehension of what you understand. Let's just make sure that we get that. You do not have to have comprehension or knowledge of what you are doing when you understand something. When you stand under the law, the authority of something, you can be ignorant of the facts, as long as you don't complain about it. Now, that's interesting because, of course, we're all familiar with the term that ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorance of facts actually is an excuse, but ignorance of law, no excuse. What does that mean? That means that you are not required to know the law that you follow. And that's the whole control apparatus right there. That is the definition of the Matrix. A bunch of people who do not know they're in a computer simulation compared to a bunch of people out here who do not know they're under a system of law. Well, I should say they do know they're under a system of law, but they have no idea what that law is. They can't see the code. They've never read it. They don't care about it. It's not important to them. They agree to follow the law they don't know. We all have agreed to follow a law that we have no idea what it says. I want to be clear. And thus, when we go through the birth certificate process, that's exactly what's happened. We're doing something we do not comprehend. And that's okay. Remember, this is a pirate cove. This is not a friendly place. This is a place that wants to steal your frickin' children. That wants to trick you into abandoning your children and making them more to the states. These people are not your friends. Okay, remember, we're not talking about the states, the private people, this romantic dream of the United States of America, that is, the 50 states united and protecting each other. No. We're talking about Washington, D.C., the pit of hell, that corrupt, vile place, that district. Do you know what district means? Would you pledge your allegiance to the District of Columbia, the corporation as they call it in their own writings? Would you pledge your allegiance if you knew what that actually meant? If you actually knew what the word district meant, would you pledge your allegiance? District is defined as a distress, a distraint, and seizure. Seizure, the word Caesarian, i.e. Caesar, sounds like seizure, doesn't it? What happens in a Caesarian? Why did they name this particular operation a Caesarian section? The Caesarian operation is the taking of a child from the womb by cutting. An operation which it is said gave name to Caesar, the Roman Empire. That's out of Webster's 1828. And what is that? That is a seizure. Seizure of the baby from the mother, from the parent, from the paternal blood. Right out of the womb. And you know, remember that, because we're going to get into that word womb towards the end here. Now, what is a district? Well, a district, as in the District of Columbia, means to press hard, to bind. See distrain. If you want to know what district means, see distrain. And so districtio, which is the Latin, means a distress or a distraint. So what do we have? We have a distress, a distraint, and seizure. We call the law the strict law, and when you look up the word strict, it comes from strained, as in distrain. Governed or governing by exact rules, observing exact rules. There is no excuse under the law for not knowing the law, to understand words in their strict legal sense. All right, so there's your strict. District, right? You're under the strict Roman law, not the spiritual law of God. So that's simple. Law of nature. What does the word die? It means dis. It's the name of the devil. In Dante's work, Dante's Inferno, right? A contraction of dis denotes separation or negation. So we have discomfort, right? But in this case, we have die or distrain. Well, that's the definition of a district. See, to strain, it says. Well, to strain something is to stretch, to injure, to use force against, to constrain, to cause to bind, as in being bound. An injury by exercise, a style, a continued manner of speaking or writing, etc., etc. It is also a hereditary disposition. What does that mean, folks? Because you can have a noble strain, or you can have a common strain. Well, what does the birth certificate process do? What does it mean to be a United States citizen? It means to be common. It means to have your blood right taken away, to no longer be considered as noble, even in the generic sense, and therefore to hold this flattering title. Not so flattering, but they still call it a flattering title because it's not real. And it also means rank and character. That's strain. So what does it mean to distrain? Well, to take away or to separate you from your rank and character, to separate you from your hereditary disposition. Your race, your generation, your descent. These are all parts of strain. What strain are you? Like a strain of bacteria, a strain of growth, a strain of this, a strain of that. You get it? So what is a district? A district. To die strict. To separate the strict. The strain. To separate the strain from its continued bloodline. To take away the heredity. To take away the rank, the character, to take away the privacy and make it public so that the law no longer recognizes the blood. This is called attainder or corruption of blood as a figurative term in the law. This is the purpose of the birth certificate process. It naturalizes, makes you into a citizen of the United States. I should say it creates a citizen, or it creates a person, and we thus confirm and ratify by acting in that person voluntarily. Let me make that clear. And again, we'll cover that in a bit. This process of what causes us to be seen as this distressed, bloodless, corrupt entity. So distraint, then, is seizure. Remember what seizure is. Remember the Caesarian, the Caesar. Why did Caesar get his name? Because he said all men must be taxed, registered as artificial persons. They must become public. They must be exactly what we're talking about. Seizure, the act of distraining or making a distress. Okay, that's what distraint is. Again, to take away the recognition or the ability or the name, the blood of the strain. Pretty amazing if you ask me. I mean, consider this for a moment. Consider this incredibly organized crime of causing us to lose our privacy, lose our status. And of course, I mean, at this point, I don't even think people really understand what privacy was. We have privacy as public persons, but it's not true privacy. It's false. It's artificial. You can't have privacy when you're the holder of another's property. In other words, when you are subject to For instance, the tax laws and all these different things. You have no privacy in reality. I mean, you have it until someone asks. But once it's asked, you have to reveal it, don't you? You think private people have to do that? No. That's not how it works. You can only control what you own. You can only control your own property. So, where are we now? We're at distress. Distress is it's urgency, importance, right? Force, violence, or strain is another word for stress. To press, to urge, to distress, or to put to difficulties. Well, that's what we are. That's exactly we're vessels in commerce, the Sea of Commerce. We're in maritime law, and we're basically in hazard. Or the better word for that is a dwelling. We're dwelled. We'll get into that sometime too. But to distress. Okay, so stress. Again, distress, right? So separate stress. The taking of personal chattel out of the possession of a wrongdoer into the custody of the party injured. Who's the wrongdoer? Well, an informer. The informer is the mother. She's informing on something bad. Well, gosh, you're the wrongdoer. You're saying, I don't want this child. I don't want the responsibility of this child. I'm going to give it to you, state. The taking of beasts. This is distress. The taking of beasts or other personal property by way of pledge. I pledge allegiance. I pledge an oath, right? To enforce the performance. What have I said? Citizenship is not a monetary debt, so you can't just pay it off. It's a performance debt. You have to perform the requirements of citizenship, the contract, in other words. Okay, it's performance debt, not financial. It must be discharged, not paid. That's a whole other topic. To enforce the performance of something due from the party distrained upon. To be in distress is to be in a performance debt, in a pledge, be distrained. To the taking of the defendant's good in order to compel an appearance in court. What is the whole purpose of the straw man? To make you appear in court. You're putting up a straw man argument, essentially. It's called the person. And that person it's an event. Again, an event that creates a legal entity, i.e. a straw man. Or the personification of a straw man argument, basically. The seizure of personal property to enforce payment of taxes, to be followed by its public sale if the taxes are not voluntarily paid. Also, the thing taken by distraining, that which is seized to procure satisfaction. What did we say the district is? If you're in the district, it means you're under seizure. You're under Caesar. You're under... You've been rendered under Caesar, and therefore you must render back to Caesar what is Caesar's, what is the seizure, what is the distress and the distraint of the district. All right, what does district mean? Trivia time. What does district mean? Seizure, distress, and distraint. These are not good things, folks. And this is, again, the difference between the 50 states united in compact to protect each other and the corporation they created called Washington, D.C. as the seat of government, a municipal corporation that is located in Washington, or i.e. the District of Columbia. New Columbia, of course. You think this is the first Columbia? Do your history. Now, in the old maritime laws, this is similar to a notion, if you're abandoning something, it's similar to the notion of salvage. So we can read some of the maxims of law, algerium maris, meaning goods thrown from a vessel in distress, become the property of the king or the lord on whose shores they were stranded. In this case, shore and jurisdiction kind of mean the same thing. So, goods thrown from a vessel. Well, you're operating in a vessel. It's called a person, a citizen of the United States. You're abandoning your child. You're throwing it overboard, to be metaphoric, in distress. In what was distress? Force, violence, strain, depress, that which is seized to procure satisfaction. So you're tossing your child over the board, basically, by putting him into a birth certificate. And we go from a definition of shore. In connection with salvage, shore means the land on which the waters have deposited things which are the subject of salvage, whether below or above ordinary high water mark. You ever noticed high water marks are on mountains where water never touches? You gotta wonder why that is. Not really. It's maritime law. You see, they water is a term that doesn't mean what you think. When I say water in the banking industry, when I say I'm underwater, do you think that really means water? No, it means I'm in debt. I'm in debt to my shoulders. I'm underwater. You see, it's also used in the stock market as various things, but trust me, it doesn't actually mean water in the sense that we're used to. And this is why the Great Flood in the Bible, also a metaphor. Anything can flood. There can be a flood of love. There can be a flood of hate. There can be a flood of violence. There can be all kinds of different floods. But we're trained to be literal because we're stupid Americans. We speak only the mongrel language of English. We don't know how to use metaphor and poetry as all the ancient writings were written in. We don't recognize it. We're dumbed down. And so, unfortunately, we don't get the meaning of these things when we say the Great Flood, for instance. Salvage, when something is salvaged, we're talking about something that is found. And what do they call an abandoned child, by the way? They call it a foundling. There are specific hospitals, you can look it up for yourself, called foundling hospitals. Specifically for abandoned children, those that are actually truly left on the shore, or at the fire department, or at the police station, or at the hospital. That kind of thing. That is a more of a true abandonment as to a legal abandonment. In other words, a purposeful contract situation that we're talking about. So, one last thing, and then we're going to get into this pretty deep here. I want you to understand that this is all based on the word deed. Where, oh where, are birth certificate records kept? Do you know? If I were to tell you to go get a copy of your birth certificate, where do you go? Well, if you know anything about the system, then you go to the Register of Deeds, right? The Deeds Office. The Register of Deeds Office, for instance, is the official steward of birth records for Orange County. The Orange County Register of Deeds only has birth records for persons born in Orange County. No man is born in Orange County. Only persons, legal fictions, legal entities are born in Orange County. Okay? No man is born there. The record of the man being born is there, but no man is born because Orange County doesn't exist in nature. Reality cannot be born of fiction, so man cannot be born in Orange County or any other county or military base or state or country or nation. It just doesn't happen. It cannot happen. A cartoon cannot come from your womb. A fiction cannot come from reality. It's a different realm. And this is why when we place this fictional name upon our true name, our Christian name, our first name, we are mixing. It's called the admixture of names. That is what causes us to contract. We are essentially contracting with Satan. Satan means that which is adversarial, i.e. adversarial to nature. We're signing a contract with Satan, i.e. the devil, whatever you want to call it. Anything that's artificial is the devil. It's not a real person, a real man. It's an anthropomorphization of what is false, artificial, a lie. That is the devil. That is Satan. What is adversarial to life, to nature, to God, to man, to law, the natural law? In other words, that which is adversarial to what is self-evident and self-existent. That's all man-made things, basically, especially all legal law. Okay, Register of Deeds Office provides standardized permanent record of real estate ownership and transfers. Records, deeds of trust, cancellations, plats, assumed names, powers of attorney, and other miscellaneous documents related to real estate. Our office also records and issues birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, marriage licenses, military discharges, and maintains the records of public notary public commissions. Now, all those things are in the deeds. They're deeds. You see, the birth certificate is actually a very dirty deed, you dirty folks, that you've done to your child, and which someone did to you. A deed is nothing more than that which is done, what is acted or affected. An act. It's an act. It's an act of what? An act of fiction. It's a fact. It's whatever is done, good or bad. A writing containing some contract or agreement and the evidence of its execution. What does that mean? It means we are executing the contract. We're executing the performance contract of personhood. An instrument on paper or parchment conveying real estate to a purchaser or donee. That's what you're doing. An instrument must be executed, and the execution attested to the manner prescribed by law, indeed a fact, in fact or in reality. For instance, we say to convey or transfer by deed. This is how we transfer the possession of things, right? Well, again, how do we do that? Well, the law recognizes automatically the blood unless someone registers a deed or registers a will. Again, who needs a will? Well, only those who have lost all their rights, who have no paternal rights to their own child. That's why you all need to fill out a will, so that the state can know who to pass the estate on to. Otherwise, it'll take it itself. It's all its property anyway. All it's interested in doing is administering its own property, its own fiction, its own person. And so it keeps it in the family because that's tradition. It charges a 50% tax, perhaps, an estate tax, perhaps an orphan tax, because both your parents are dead now. You see, that's the difference. There's no inheritance taxes for private people. The blood never died. But when you get a death certificate, that's the end. There's nothing more. You have no issues, no children as property, as blood, because the law doesn't recognize it, because you sold out your children. You think I'm joking? Do you think this is? You think I'm not making sense? Am I going too fast? Well, you better take some notes or get my books, because, folks, this is the real deal. This is what is happening. And again, we're going to go over all these words because it ended up that I found the perfect word that describes this whole process. It verifies everything. What we're talking about is an investiture, a delivery of possession in the presence of other vassals. That's why we have a witness. And as far as what an execution is, when a contract is ended, in other words, when a person dies, it is considered an execution. Execution is a legal term, has nothing to do with the physical violence at all. It is simply the end of contract or the end of an obligation. End of personhood is called an execution. Okay? So it's, remember, legal words are always metaphoric to reality. Okay? And say with the Bible terms, they're always metaphoric. They're always trying to get you to you have to know the literal term to know the metaphor. So, now I've got just a crap load of information I'm about to unload on you, so listen up. Now, what is birth? Unfortunately, I just lost about half an hour's worth of of recording time. I don't know what happened there, but okay, let's start over here. What is birth? Oh, I hope I can do it as good. What is birth? Well, there's two kinds of birth in legal language, and the language of nature, if you will. The real and the fiction, they're always adversarial to each other. They're always going to be opposite of each other. So we have childbirth, which cannot really be mistaken for anything other than childbirth, as opposed to the word birth alone. Childbirth is the act of bringing forth a child, including the travail and the labor as the pains of childbirth. This is not anything that can be confused as fiction. A birth certificate, however, is a recording of that event, the birth event, and this we call just regular birth. We talked about the cesarean as the the operation that takes the child from the womb by cutting, therefore not allowing the proper birth, the natural birth, to happen. This is again a metaphor. It renders the legal entity, which is what we're supposed to render back to Caesar or the district, again. So, childbirth, what is birth? Now, birth comes from the word B-E-R-T-H instead of an I, and that, of course, refers to the maritime law or shipping rules, but it really comes from the Latin partus or pario, to bear. Now remember, we bear our arms, our family arms, our bloodline, or we bear the seal and flag of the United States, the law of the flag of the nation, as our father. Right? Again, who you call your father is your creator or your God. It's the same concept. So when the nation becomes your father, you become its citizen. You're born or birthed into it. Birth, with an I, is the act of coming into life or of being born. Now, wait a minute. Why or? Aren't those the same things, coming into life or being born? Well, no. I think I read on another show that the term life has like 20-something different definitions. How many things do you say are alive that are not? Do you have a pet rock? do you the word life, as defined in Webster's dictionary, I believe it was, actually is defined as the life of a contract or the execution of a contract, right? Well, does a contract actually have life? Well, no, that's referring to the time that the contract was signed to the time it was executed or brought into fruition, the discharged, etc. At that point, a death certificate is issued for the person, right? Birth certificate, death certificate, that is the execution of the contract, of the birth certification and the performance debt that belonged to it. If I don't exist anymore as a man, well then as the puppet master, well then my puppet, my person, my status cannot be operated. And what's very important, the law says that status in this regard cannot be transferred. This is why the estate dies with me. It's a state of life, referring to the life of the person, not necessarily the man. But the person dies when the man dies because no one else can operate that person. Status. Okay, so the act of coming to life or being born. Now, an excerpt in poetry, it is generally applied to human beings as the birth of a son. It refers to lineage, extraction, descent, again, bloodline, as you could be from a Grecian birth. It is used of a high or low extraction being, again, a word of abandonment or delivery or birth. But is often used by way of distinction for a descent from noble or honorable parents and ancestors as, quote, a man of birth. Now, here we're talking about, of course, nobility. You're talking about the bloodline of the kings, the presidents of the United States, the bloodline. This is, the one country that doesn't understand that it's under a bloodline of rulers. The posterity, as it's called in the Constitution. We're the dumbest nation in the world because we don't know that we are also a royal society. It's just that they call it by different names. And so noble or honorable parents as opposed to parents who are in the birth certificate system. Commoners, peons, right? So, distinction for a descent from noble or honorable parents as a man of birth. So I would call the bloodline of the queen, I would call men of birth, essentially, as a colloquialism. The condition in which a person is born, the condition in which a person is born. Remember, person is not a man. Person is a fiction. Person is a status. A condition in which a status is born, or i.e. birthed, right? That which is born, that which is produced. There's a big difference there, whether animal or vegetable. The act of bringing forth, as in two children, she had two children at birth, or in a theological sense, regeneration is called the new birth. Now, that's a reference to that notion of being reborn, right? That term that is so misused by the Christian religions, the the empty words that come out of the typical Christian mouth, who has no idea what the Bible says, who has no idea what the law is, who has no idea what Christ is. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. He's my buddy. And I believe in him, and therefore I'm going to be saved and go to heaven. You really think that's the extent of it, huh? All you got to do is just believe. No, I'm afraid that's not true. In fact, the Bible over and over disagrees with that statement. It says that he who does not follow the law, I'm paraphrasing, of course. But, I mean, the whole thing is set up to follow Christ, not to just say, I believe in Christ. I mean, that's patently ridiculous, and it totally disagrees from the Bible. And I'll say it again, religion is probably this is the most ironic part about this, is that religions are probably the most obfuscating, stumbling blocks to men understanding the Bible. Because, of course, religions have their own doctrines. The Bible says don't take any other doctrines, which means law. The church says follow the law of the land. The church prays in public. The Bible says never pray in public. In fact, when you say the Lord's Prayer, go into a closet so that you're not praying. Because you're going to see the most corrupt men in church praying loudly in deep voice, resonating because they're empty words. It's public prayer. It doesn't mean anything. Go in the closet. That's what it says in Matthew 6, I believe it is. It tells you how to say the Lord's Prayer, not just to say it. It says, say the Lord's Prayer by going into a closet, being private, not public. I showed that to my mom one day in church. She just looked at me and smiled. She knew I was right. She couldn't say anything about it. She sat up. Next couple of minutes, we all stood up and said the Lord's Prayer, chanting it. So the church is probably the number one most responsible entity, whether denomination it is, for keeping us away from the actual law, the actual Bible. That's ironic, to the extreme. It's almost paradoxical when you think about it, because of course we conflate religion with the Bible, but the two are completely opposed to each other. That is just one example of what churches do wrong according to the Bible, according to Christ even. We either fall into religion because we want to have that. Most people go to church not for the services or to learn the Bible. They go for the camaraderie, the ability to maybe help someone, or the ability to try to control their fellow parishioners in their social status at the church. That would be the Mormon way. So you're not really there for the word of God, the law of God. You're not really there for that. You're there as a social construct, basically. That's not true religion or true, following of Christ. That's the point. Just empty words. Again, when we say that in a theological sense, we say the word regeneration. When we're regenerated or born again, that is called a new birth. All that, it's a beautiful concept that's just been ruined by the gobbledygook of religious speak. What that really means is that you're reborn into nature, that you're reborn under the natural law. You follow no other doctrines but that of the personification of the law, which is Jesus Christ. Okay, you follow the example, in other words. Okay, you follow the story. That's what it means. You're born again into nature. You're born again into your real self, not this third person that you've been acting at, not as the property of another, but as, quote unquote, the Son of God or the property of God. That's what it means. It's metaphoric, it's beautiful, it's a wonderful concept that has just, again, been ruined by evangelical crap that you hear on TV and unfortunately see infiltrating into every church. Now, it refers to origin, beginning, the birth of an empire is an example used. Do you think an empire comes from a woman's womb? Do you think an empire is something that comes from man, is born as a man and becomes an empire somehow? No, an empire is a fiction. An empire is a word to describe a massive megalopolis of fiction. That's all it is. Do you think that has a true birth, or is it the fictional birth, right? Origin, beginning. What is the beginning of something? It's its birth. Now, BERTH is actually a station in which a ship resides. The birth, again coming from the root bear, this is BERTH, a station in which a ship rides at anchor. So you imagine you put an anchor, comprehending the space in which she ranges. So if I put an anchor in the water, I'm only allowed to float as far as that anchor will bear me until it tightens up and I can't go any further. I'm stuck in the water. In other words, I'm on the land, but the water prevents me from touching the land, so I anchor to the land, and I'm stuck. Well, that's the story of the commercial vessel or citizen ship. We can't touch the land, or we can only touch public lands, which, of course, is the property of government. Our home is property of government. Our name, our status, everything, the money, it's all property of government. We're users alone. We have no land to stand on. The pirates of the United States, the district, Caesar has stolen all of that through the birth certificate process, because only blood can inherit land. We are standing without blood consideration in attainder in a corruption of blood. That's the whole purpose of the birth certificate process, to corrupt the blood, to place us all into a state of attainder, and to put us under the property, i.e. status or person, straw man of Caesar, of government, of the district. It's very bad. Remember what district means. It means to bind, to distrain, to press, distress, distraint, and seizure. That's not a good thing. Okay, so what else? In a more familiar language, this birth, B-E-R-T-H, the word signifies any situation or place where a vessel lies or can lie, whether at anchor or at wharf, a room or apartment in a ship, the box or place for sleeping at the sides of the cabin, a place for a hammock. In seaman's language, it literally means to allot each man a place for his hammock. Now, of course, that's a reference or a metaphor for the same concept as sleeping in the Lord's manor. That's what we are doing. That's what residence is. See, our domicile is the United States, but our residence is in the state. That's two words that mean different things. To reside somewhere is not necessarily to have domicile. To be under domicile means you're dominated. We reside in the states. The states are third parties in our agency. That's another show. We are agents for service of process for the person of the United States. When we deal with the states, we are acting in that agency as United States citizens. In other words, we're foreigners that reside in each of the 50 states, whichever state we live in or have our residence registered to our person, but our true source, our true state of birth never leaves the United States, the District of the United States. The seat of government, Washington, D.C., which is foreign to all other states and nations, including California and Nevada and Utah and Denver, Colorado, etc., etc. So, essentially our course, our natural course, our life purpose in pursuit of all the things of God, of nature, to follow the law of nature, is interrupted. It is sidetracked. The land is flooded with virtual water. We're put onto the sea of commerce in personhood, and our course has been changed into the pursuit of course, mammon. What does the Bible say? You can't have two gods, can't have two masters, can't have two laws. You cannot worship both God and mammon. It's impossible. You cannot use artifice and worship nature. It's a self-evident truth. We're birthed. How does birth happen? What exactly? Okay, childbirth, the act of bringing forth a child, the pains, through the labor. The taking of a child from the womb is what Caesar does. Well, what's the womb, folks? What is the womb? WOOM is an alternative spelling. A womb is the uterus or matrix of a female. Yes, you heard me right. This show is kind of dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of what we call the Matrix, right? The movie, in other words, it's what is the Matrix? What is it compared to what we actually live in today, which you could call the legal matrix, a set of code that makes everything run, right? Money makes the world go round, that kind of thing. Money doesn't exist in any tangible, actual substance, only in form, so kind of like the Matrix. The reason that the womb or uterus is called a matrix is because it's where something is formed, right? Well, think about the movie. In the movie, you're in a matrix, you're in a womb, you're in a uterus, you're in an amniotic sac, essentially, that keeps you alive, gives you sustenance, and the cortexes are computer cords that plug into your mind, into your body, and put you into a simulation of life. How is that any different, metaphorically, than the legal matrix, the legal code? For instance, when in the movie, the guy's looking, the operator is looking at the matrix, all he sees are these information going down the stream, these letters, these symbols, these numbers. All that is a representation of is the legal code. What makes up the legal realm? Words, symbols, that's it. It's all made of words. It's all word magic. It's all the simulation of words. That's it. That's all it is. That's what property is. That's what everything is. All it is just words. That's all I see anymore. When he's looking at the Matrix, he sees the code, but he also sees that it's a redhead or a blonde or a brunette. Well, I can see the same thing now. I've studied the legal language so long now that I see the metaphor for what it is. I see what the word actually means. And that's the point where you all have to get to. You all have to get to it so that you recognize it when you see it, that you know the real from the fiction. You know that when these words are used by the pirates who've organized this system of birth certification, registration, confirmation, and ratification, and contract, that they can't fool you anymore once you realize the code of their magic tricks. The words, it's all it is. Once you know the words, nothing else. You can never be fooled again. So, back to this concept of the womb, the matrix, right? Matrix, the womb, again, the uterus or matrix of a female, that part where the young of an animal is conceived and nourished till its birth, the place where anything is produced. Anything is produced. Well, how's a gold coin produced? In a matrix, in a mold, right? Place where anything is produced. Any large or deep cavity. For instance, this metaphor of in the Bible is the womb of the morning in the scriptures, right? The womb in the morning. Does that mean that morning, the early daylight, somehow has a vagina, a uterus? No, come on. The Bible is metaphoric in almost all of its teachings. The womb of the morning in Scripture is the clouds, which distill dew and make it rain, supposed to be emblematic of the church bringing forth the multitudes to Christ, or i.e. the law. Bring forth the multitudes to the law of God through Christ's example. In Scripture, again, the clouds are called the womb of the morning. The clouds are the matrix for rain, anything where something is formed or produced. The matrix also means to enclose or to breed in secret. Now, to enclose, again, think of that pod that all the people are in the movie, or think of the person that we're all put into in the legal matrix, legal system. Now we get to the word matrix. Matrix, from the Latin matrix, which comes from mater or mother, the womb, is the definition of matrix. The cavity in which the fetus of an animal is formed and nourished till its birth. Number 2, a mold. The cavity in which anything is formed and which gives it shape as the matrix of a type. Type would be a status, of course. The place where anything is formed or produced as the matrix of metals, etc., in dyeing the 5 simple colors, black, white, blue, red, and yellow, of which all the rest are composed. So that's the matrix of colors that make all other colors. That's what you get in your little dye packs for your printers, etc. Matrix is a very, very useful term, actually. It's used for a lot of things, but in law it has one specific meaning. In law, or in the civil law, the matrix is defined as the protocol or first draft of a legal instrument, from which all copies must be taken. The protocol or first draft of a legal instrument from which all copies must be taken. Folks, that's your birth certificate, okay? I'm sorry, sir, we can't give you a driver's license here in the state of Kentucky that you just moved. You're just a resident here. You're an agent of the United States. In order to prove that you are legitimate, we're going to need a copy of your original, the protocol, the first draft of your legal instrument that birthed the legal entity. That would be your birth certificate. Thank you very much. We need your matrix. We need proof that you are in the matrix, that you were born into the fiction. Again, place where anything is generated or formed. There's a guy that runs a website called Ethereal. I think it's ethereal.blogspot. There's a good little thing on there. His whole website is this kind of information. But he describes it as such. He says the fictional legal entity is born on a 2-dimensional piece of paper, so it's a form. What do we call it? We call government forms that we fill out. Conceived by the mother, which is labeled as the informant, right? And wait a minute. So the statement of birth is a legal instrument known as a matrix. Who signs the matrix? Well, the informant. Why is the mother listed on the matrix, on the birth certificate, as the informant? Just to give you an idea of how this works, again, figuratively, if you will, or legally, or even ecclesiastically, we have the matrix ecclesia, which is Latin for a mother church, applied to the cathedrals in relation to other churches. For instance, the Holy See would be the matrix ecclesia of all other Catholic churches, etc. Parochial church in relation to the chapels or minor churches attached to it or depending on it. So the United Methodist Church, all those churches are dependent upon the corporation that is the United Methodist whatever system that is. It is a 501c3 corporation, is not a religion, is not a true religion, is not natural in any way. The churches are sub-corporations of that main corporation. In the Mormon Church, for instance, Corporation Soul. Other corporation souls include the Pope, the Queen, all the bishops of the Catholic Church, the King, the presidents, the senators, the congressmen. These are all immortal offices that are passed to their sole proprietor, their sole president, basically. For instance, the Mormon Church is really the corporation soul of the president of the church. The Pope is his own corporation soul, and of course the Queen, when she visits any of the countries, nations, whatever, in the United Kingdom, any of the kingdoms, well, she's a different corporation soul in each of those corporate structures, which we call states, provinces, cities, counties, etc. So every different place she goes, she wears she goes there in the guise of a different corporation soul. This is all in my book. You can type in corporation soul into, say, Wikipedia and get the simple explanation too, and it'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you right now. The Queen doesn't exist. It's a title that belongs to the corporation, the Crown Corporation. The Pope doesn't exist as a man. The Pope is a title, a crown worn by a man. But the President doesn't exist. No man is ever a president, only the man's person, etc., etc., etc. We worship artificial persons. That's the big reveal. That's the big thing that is the most shocking thing I found, is that basically we're stuck in corporate. We worship corporations as our gods. Every state, every nation, every country, every government is simply a corporation, an artificial person. Nothing else. That's all it is. No man can be sovereign unless that man somehow rules over others. This is why they say God is supposed to be Jehovah, nature is supposed to be our sovereign and our sovereign law. We're supposed to be under that sovereign and no other. And again, that's in Scripture. Okay, so the statement of birth is a legal instrument known as a matrix. Matrix is a place where anything is generated, the protocol or first draft of a legal instrument, from which all copies must be taken. You know how difficult it is to get a copy of the birth certificate. It has to come from that record, the recorded deeds that we talked about earlier. So now we know what the matrix really is. Now I want to read you something from Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Now, if you're not familiar with Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, apparently this is kind of an unverified, in other words, not verified to be official, at least the last I heard, government white paper on such what we call gestation techniques, with the subtitle of Top Secret, an Introductory Programming Manual, Operations Research Technical Manual, TM-SW7905.1. And it gives us a very good look into this matrix concept, this womb or artificial womb concept. I'm going to read that. First of all, we need to know that gestation is the action or process of carrying young in the womb. Carrying. Now, the word carry, as all words do, has a dual meaning. To be carried in legal, well, how about cash and carry? How about the carrying of a contract, etc., etc.? You see, we're being carried by being dependent upon the state. We're carried in the vessel. That's why we call it a citizen ship, because we're being carried by the United States in essentially bankruptcy. Bankruptcy refers to moral bankruptcy more than anything. So here's what Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars says, now that we understand this concept of the artificial womb that is created for us, the Matrix. Okay, logistics. The successful application of a strategy requires a careful study of inputs, outputs, the strategy connecting the inputs and outputs, and the available energy sources to fuel the strategy. Sounds like being plugged into the Matrix. This study is called logistics. A logistical problem is studied at the elementary level first, and then levels of greater complexity are studied as a synthesis of elementary factors. This means that a given system is analyzed or broken down into subsystems, and those in turn are analyzed until, by this process, one arrives at the logistical atom, the individual. Now, atom, A-D-A-M, this is A-T-O-M, but A-D-A-M is also defined as mankind. Not just one man, but mankind, all of mankind. Mankind, again, referring to sort of the slave state, those commonalities that are not private. This is that do not reserve all the rights and that are not following God. This is where the process of synthesis properly begins, and at the time of the birth of the individual. Now, I'm reading from this document. This is where the process of synthesis properly begins, and at the time of the birth of the individual. What is this synthesis they're talking about? Synthesis is getting us to believe we are the person, the status that that is created, that legal entity on the birth certificate, that we are the name that we use in commerce, that we are a fictional entity, somehow that has crossbreeded with reality. Somehow fiction and reality have joined together and entered into the devil's contract. All right, that is the process of synthesis, trying to get us to merge together with what the next chapter is, which is called the artificial womb. This is how they synthesis us into the Matrix. What is the Matrix? A womb. Okay, so next section in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars is called the artificial womb. Here's what it says. From the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs. Various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. You've heard of shell corporations, for instance. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, lawful and unlawful, chaotic and natural, to provide shelter for the evolutionary processes of growth and maturity, for example, survival, to provide security for freedom. Freedom means franchise, remember that. So you're free to roam around the Matrix, which is a prison for your mind. That's freedom. You're free to roam around the jurisdiction of the United States. That's franchise or freedom. Freedom within a cage. To provide security for freedom and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. Now, isn't that a perfect way to describe the legal law? To provide defensive protection for offensive activity? But I have the right to harm another. Not under natural law, you don't. To provide defensive protection for offensive activity. That's basically this is why we have such bad behavior today, because no law is being enforced. You can't enforce moral behavior. You can't enforce love of your brother or your neighbor. You can't enforce love. It's not enforceable. It's part of the natural law, part of the unwritten law, not the strict law. Back to the document. It says, this is equally true of both the general public and the elite. See, what you don't realize is that these elite, they're in their own artificial womb. It's just different. It's one of power and authority. It's one of blood. It's one of the fiction that you're of the bloodline of the kings, and therefore you're special, you're better, you're more noble, you are of a higher order. That's equally as much of a delusion as the one we're in. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes go about the solution of problems, obviously. Because really, we in the commonality here, we are the problem of the elites, right? Their whole job is to manage and extract as much wealth from us as possible. Of course, all the wealth belongs to them anyway, so they allow us to use their wealth and charge us interest and taxation on that use. It's just the way it works, folks. Finally, we read the political structure of a nation, and that equals dependency is what it says. So the political structure of a nation - dependency. So here it is describing the legal matrix for you. The artificial womb we call the United States District. The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human God to eliminate all risk from their life. Pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible, as you're seeing today. So the human God, the politician, meets incredibly with incredibility by promising the world and delivering absolutely nothing. That's to you, Trump. That's to you, Obama. That's to you. See, they promise the world. Well, remember, world is a description of what they've created in the Bible. The world, according to the Bible, is man's creation, not God's. That's the metaphoric term for world. So they promise the world. That's all they can promise because the world is their creation. But you see, what they're promising is that the world will be changed to benefit us somehow, someday. But it never is. They deliver nothing. So who is the bigger liar? The public or the Godfather, the elite? This public behavior is surrender born of fear, laziness, and expediency. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon useful against a disgusting public. So which is worse in your opinion? Do you think it's them or do you think it's us? Because really, a bank robber does what he does best. He robs banks. A lawyer does what he does best. He's a corrupt fornicator of the law, essentially. Whore of the law. These people are doing what the system produced them to do. But the public just goes along with it. The public consents to it. The public says, yes, that's okay. The public votes for these a-holes to do what they're doing. We we elect people to do this stuff. We pay through our taxes the salaries of the police that beat us up, for God's sake, and kill us with tasers and exact from us money, right? Who's worse, you or the guy that you think is forcing you to do something? Because remember, you're volunteering for this. You can go out, you can get out at any time. It's all in U.S. code, how to get rid of your citizenship, but you don't. You don't do it because you're getting benefits. Well, how am I going to live without Social Security? How am I going to live without a driver's license? Well, you drive privately. You don't need one, you dummy. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to put my children in the school? Hello, you're not. You're going to save your children from public Zionist education. You're going to save your children from the law being changed out from under them, from growing up to be your enemy because they go to public school and get a public education, to be public-minded, not private. Where God is outlawed, where the Bible is strictly forbidden, so they can never learn the law. Oh, but how am I going to put my children into public school? That's the idea, folks. You think public school is a benefit? It's slave training. It's how to become human capital 101. Oh, but how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? You know what? When the Bible says God will provide, I'm convinced at this point that means one of two things. That nature and everything that grows in nature, everything that is real, will provide. Guess what that includes? Man. When you get the typical man alone, male or female, they're generally good people. It's only when they get into crowds when the idiocracy comes on. Right? So I'm convinced that when you're ready, when I'm ready, when anyone's ready to finally take that quote-unquote leap of faith, that step of faith and back into nature and the law, that the notion that God will provide means that man will provide. Right? You have to be reasonable about what these things actually mean. What can God possibly provide but nature itself, including man, right? It's God helps those who help themselves, that kind of thing, right? Now, as far as silent weapons for quiet wars, it's described in the introduction as social engineering or the automation of society. The engineering of a social automation system or silent weapons on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life or slavery and genocide, in other words. So in other words, they've enslaved us and they are committing genocide on us in their own way through genetics. Genetics, just a modern term for eugenics. It's the same thing, folks. Look it up. In other words, they've set up an artificial womb to make us feel safe and warm and comfortable, and they've plugged us into this legal system, this legal matrix of codes, of words, and we're volunteers instead. So in this way, they don't have to just pull the Big Brother type of situation and just where everybody knows that they're under military oppression. We're under military rule, but we're not under martial law. The two terms are synonymous. It's just one is by force and one is voluntary. As soon as the volunteerism goes away, then you'll see the true colors of what the United States is, as you saw it in the Civil War, where the states tried to leave the Union and the central government said, "Hail no," and killed many people to quote-unquote save the Union. Well, that meant the end of the United States, the beginning of what we have today, but that's a story for some other time. The true history of what the United States is and how it became what it is. Of course, when Congress abandons Congress, when states' representatives abandon Congress, then Congress no longer exists. The United States is dead at that point. At that point, when the board of directors doesn't show up for the corporation, it's dead. And that is why Lincoln had to use executive orders and not the vote of Congress to go to war against its own frickin' people who decided to leave. That's the true story. And we'll do that some other time. Now, getting back to this concept of birth, the birth certificate, to put a quick sort of thing on this, it creates a straw man. As we know, stramonius homo, a man of straw, one of no substance, put forward as bail or surety. A straw man is also defined as a draft or outlined copy ready for suggestions. Remember, the Matrix is the original. The third party used as cover for illegal or shady deals. That's what a citizenship is. Nominate a director or weak or flawed person with no standing, a weak or imaginary opposition, set up only to be easily confuted. In other words, they put us in a person or property, which means that we are very easily defeated in court because we're not the owner of the property, we're just the users. A person set up to serve as a cover for a usually questionable transaction, well, yeah, it's questionable because, remember, legal law is opposed to God's law or natural law. So definitely questionable everything we do on a daily basis. So, bail, what is bail? Wait, what was that straw man definition again? Set up to be one of no substance, put forward as bail or surety. Well, bail means to deliver. Where do you have your child? In the delivery room or the bail room. You're bailing your child. You're delivering it. The persons who become sureties. What was the straw man? Bail and surety. The persons who become sureties for the appearance of the defendant in court. In other words, when I say I'll appear in court, I'm putting up the person as surety and getting bail thereof. I'll explain that in a minute. To deliver the defendant to persons who, in the manner prescribed by law, become securities for his appearance in court. All right, the security for me to appear in court is that person and the law that's behind it that has all the sanctions, all the punishments for if I don't appear, all the bails, the money. To become bail for another, in other words. What is bail in Webster's? To set free or deliver, or liberate from arrest or imprisonment. Well, that could be called parenthood too. Liberation from arrest and imprisonment, house arrest, if you will, grounding. The parental control of the child is absolute unless that right is given away. So, liberate to deliver upon security given that the person bailed shall appear and answer in court. The whole thing here is to ensure that we appear as the person in court to be administered. Not to be judged, but to have our accounts, our persons, our status administered. We don't have a choice in the matter. Well, you can fight it. You got all kinds of gurus out there who say you can do this and you can do this, but ultimately, remember, it's not you. It's not your property that you're there as surety for. You don't have a choice. You're not the creator. You're under contract. Contract makes the law. You see, all of this crap that you hear in the patriot, the law, legal movement, for the most part, you can't win. You're a slave. Slaves don't win. You will be administered because you're acting in surety of the property of another. It's that simple. The word bail is applied to the magistrate, i.e. God or judge, or the surety, which is you making the appearance in front of the magistrate. The magistrate bails a man. Now, this is an important distinction I want you to get. Because you've heard of, or you've gone through the process, or you've seen it on TV, whatever. You've heard of bail bondsmen, etc. The magistrate bails a man. Now, they don't use the word man very often in this here, but you see, the surety, you're acting as the surety for the person. So it's designating the man. The magistrate bails a man when he liberates him from arrest or imprisonment. In other words, he says, I'm going to allow the person to go free back into franchise, into commerce, which means that I'm putting no sanction on you as surety, or the person who ensures the performance, the man who ensures the performance of the person under contract. I know this is a lot of information, folks. Listen to it a couple times. Take notes. Look these words up for yourself. Get the book. It's free. The magistrate bails a man. Okay. Upon bond given with sureties. Now, the surety bails a person. The man bails a person when he procures his release from arrest by giving bond for his appearance. In other words, I'm giving a sum of money that ensures that the person will appear in court. The only way a person can appear in court is through agency. Either I'm going to appear as the person, or I'm going to appear, or someone else is going to appear as the attorney, i.e. agent of that person. That's the only way an appearance can be made. procures his release from arrest by giving bond for his appearance. To deliver goods in trust. Do you know that children are actually considered goods, merchandise? Because a child is actually a legal entity, not referring to the man, but referring to the legal concept, legal construct. Yes, children are goods in trust upon a contract, express or implied, that the trust shall be faithfully executed on the part of the bailee or person entrusted. What is a bailee? So many words. So many things. A bailee is the person to whom goods are committed in trust and who has a temporary possession and a qualified property in them for the purposes of the trust. That's government. Now, a special bail consists of actual sureties recognized to answer for the appearance of the person in court. That's you, as distinguished from common bail, which is nominal, i.e. in name only. Again, bail means to deliver. All right, so we have our child in the delivery room. Oh, well, let me read this first. The security given for the release of a prisoner from custody as the man is out upon bail. Okay, prisoner is a status. If I give a security, then I lose the status of prisoner, and I am now a bail. I'm on bail. Excessive bail ought not to be required. We know that. But that only applies, you see, to those who've reserved their rights and who have the benefit of the Constitution. It doesn't apply. The Constitution in no way applies to U.S. citizens. I want you to understand that. Above all else, I can read that right out of the court's mouth. Bail is common or special. Now listen to this, folks. Common bail, i.e. straw man, are imaginary persons who are pledges for the plaintiff's prosecution. Special bail, or special, is what that word actually means, a species, not common. Special bail must be men of real substance. But common bail, us, are imaginary persons who are pledges. So, in other words, straw men. Okay, this is, again, this all has to do with the Matrix, the fiction. And law, so now we go to bond, right? A bail bond. So if we give a bail bond, you have the bonds of affection, the bonds that are financial instruments, etc., etc. Charity is the bond of perfectness, and that's a very important statement. But a bond is an obligation imposing a moral duty as by a vow or a promise by law or other means. So that tells you that law or other means is not moral. In law, an obligation or deed by which a person binds himself, his heirs, executors, and administrators to pay a certain sum on or before a future day appointed, or to perform certain acts. Usually a condition is added, etc., etc., etc. It's a state of servitude or slavery, i.e. being captive. What is born in bond or free? All right? So, a bond, a straw man, is a state of servitude. What do we call citizenship? Voluntary servitude or voluntary slavery, being captive under the law. This is another word for nativity. Nativity, in Christ's nativity. That means that you're born in slavery. This is why Christ was able to break free and crucify himself from the flesh, from the fiction, and become real and not have that be in that state of nativity, which is another word for naturalization. Nativity is not a good word. And again, the church has misled us in that description. Look it up, folks. Look it up in the concordances. So many different things. When we give possession to somebody, When we abandon or deliver something to someone else, we're giving them possession, which means to invest with property. Remember, your child is your property. You're investing with property, your child to the state, i.e. the district. Okay, so delivery seems to be the interesting word. Now, delivery, again, 2 words. D and livery, right? D to take away. The act of delivering, release, rescue, as from slavery, restraint, oppression, or danger. Danger, by the way, means jurisdiction. I don't know if you knew that or not, but etymologically, the word danger actually refers to the jurisdiction of the state. If you're in the jurisdiction of the district, then you are in danger. This is why you have a maritime law and why you need insurance. The whole process of this is to put you in a ship in danger, to change your course into the danger so that you have to be insured. It's all metaphoric. Surrender, a giving up. This is what delivery is, folks. A giving up, a surrender, a release, a giving or passing from one to another as the delivery of goods or of a deed. What is a deed? Where's the birth certificate kept? The Office of Deeds. Utterance, pronunciation, or manner of speaking. He has a good delivery when he speaks well. Another word for delivery is childbirth. Now remember, we can talk about the real thing where it has no legal connotations, or we can talk about delivery being a release. Now, what is livery? What is livery? What is this word that we're taking away? What does it mean to deliver or take away the livery? The act of delivering possession of lands or tenements. You're taking away the ability to have a livery, have an inheritance. You're taking away the blood. Livery of season, which is the exchange of money for land, which is a feudal investiture. We're in a feudal system. It's just called by a different name. The delivery of a deed being sufficient. So in America, no ceremony is necessary to a conveyance of real estate, the delivery of a deed being sufficient. All right? It's also, livery is a release from wardship or a deliverance. A form of dress by which noblemen and gentlemen distinguish their servants is a livery, right? So if you're delivering, delivery, the act of releasing. All right, so you're literally releasing your child from your bloodline. You're delivering it. You're giving and passing it to another as goods and under a receipt or a deed, a birth certificate. Restraint into distraint. Okay, a wardship, guardianship, pupillage, state of being under a guardian. That's what we become. After the birth process, we're given back to our parents, as the courts say, because of their beneficial or beneficent will. They allow us to go with our natural parents, they say. So, so we know delivery. Delivery, when we look up the word abandonment, it's delivery, okay? But what about this new word that I never looked into before, which I'm just so excited about? I hate it. I hate the fact that it's the truth. I hate the fact that this is how it works. But at the same time, I'm so excited because now, you see, we're back to this notion of the informant. We talked about, at least I hope we talked about, the informer, what it is. The relator is an informer. In bastardy, a state or begotten and born out of lawful wedlock, which condition disables the person from inheriting an estate. That's citizenship or public citizenship to the United States, as opposed to the states where the actual land is. Remember, we're walking around on the water. We're in a citizenship on sail in the Sea of Commerce, the flood of the legal matrix. We don't have access to the land. We're like the pieces on the monopoly board, where everywhere we land is the property of another. We have to pay tax, fees, usage fees, etc. That's why we're always being charged for everything we do. The informer is the mother, or the relatrix. And that brought us to relaxare, to release, to have release. Relaxation is a term of conveyance, meaning a release, an instrument by which a person relinquishes to another his right in anything. His in legality, there is no real sex. His means his or her. It doesn't matter. There is no sex in a fictional entity. It's not real. Okay, so when we hear the word his, even when it's talking about God, it's not referring to sex. Usually you use his or her only to signify either a sovereign state, an authoritative state, or a submissive state. It's not personal. It doesn't have anything to do with actual sex. It's just the way the language works. Another part of the language has been stolen from us. And the whole purpose of this gender bending is to take away the gender of language so that we can no longer use words with any authority or with submission. We just have one word fits all, which does not work. So, relaxation letters passing the signet by which a debtor was relaxed from personal diligence. The debtor was relaxed from personal diligence. In other words, you're giving away your duty to be a parent. You're giving up your parental rights and becoming a guardian only, which means your child can be taken from you at any time because of this agreement, this birth certificate process. The release the person to whom a release is made, that would be the government, and the release or the maker of a release, that would be you. And now we're at the term release. This word explains it all. This word is the most important word I've come across, I think. Because it's two words. It's release. You know, like a new lease on life. You're releasing your child. It's like a sublet. Release means to lease again or grant new lease as accord and satisfaction. The relinquishment, concession, or giving up of a right, claim, or privilege by the person in whom it exists or to whom it accrues to the person against whom it might have been demanded or enforced. In other words, you're giving up your paternal right to he, who, or it, the government. It is in this sense, it is a contract and must be supported by lawful and valuable consideration. A discharge of a debt by the act of a party. What is your debt to your child? You're indebted by the natural law to care, love, provide for that child. You're discharging that debt by handing it over, releasing it to the state. Leasing, releasing your duty to the state as distinguished from an extinguishment, which is a discharge by operation of law, and in distinguishing release from receipt. A receipt is evidence that an obligation has been discharged, but release is itself a discharge of it. You have discharged your parental right, or i.e. duty. Every right has a duty. Every duty implies a right. An express release is one directly made in terms by deed. Where is your birth certificate held? It's a deed, an action, an event. It was your action of giving away your child. An express release is one directly made in terms by deed or other suitable means. An implied release is one which releases from acts of the creditor or owner without any express agreement. A release by operation of law is one which, though not expressly made, the law presumes in consequence of some act by the releaser. Well, you sign that birth certificate. You're the informer. For instance, when one of several joint obligators is expressly released, the others are also released by operation of law, referring to a corporation. Liberation is another word for release, discharge, or setting free from restraint or confinement. Well, again, that describes parental rights, right? Thus, a man unlawfully imprisoned may obtain his release on habeas corpus. Although that's suspended for any of us, we don't have that right because that's a constitutional right, private right for those who preserved all their rights. We don't have the right of habeas corpus unless they give it to us. The abandonment to or by a person called as a witness in a suit of his interest in the subject matter of the controversy in order to qualify him to testify. Who's the witness, folks, on the birth certificate? It's the doctor. Or in a marriage, it's your best man, right? Under the common law rule, a receipt or certificate. A release is a receipt or certificate given by a ward to the guardian. Who's the ward? The government. Who's the guardian appointed? You. On the final settlement of the later's accounts or by any other beneficiary on the termination of the trust administration, relinquishing all and any further rights, claims, or demands growing out of the trust or incident to it. Are you understanding what this is telling you? That you have released all your parental rights towards your child. You've been given a guardianship over that child that extends only as long as you are a good little citizen obeying all the laws. But the state can take that child at any time. And indeed, it pays a lot of money to states, third parties, to take your children on behalf of that agency relationship. So, yeah. Pretty bad out there when it comes to that. A deed of release, that sounds pretty obvious, conveys back to him the legal title to the estate. So I don't know how to tell you this, folks, but we've been tricked. We've been tricked into abandoning our children, taking away their right of livery. In other words, the right that I have to pass on my estate to my child in my bloodline, my family, has been taken away. The blood has been corrupted, metaphorically, by the legal law. I'm no longer recognized as a man, but as a person. When the court calls me, it calls the person, the full name, or its agent. It never calls for any man. No man can appear. Only persons can appear. If you're going to court and you're saying you're answering to the legal name, then you are appearing as the person, not as your true self. What is the highest? One of the highest laws in the natural law, the law of God, is to love the self. It's hard to say, but love yourself. Love yourself. Not that you should be in love with yourself, but to love yourself as you are, as you were born in nature, under God, under the law. Okay, don't confuse these two concepts. The one is satanic. The love of self is satanic, adversarial to self-love, i.e. the notion that you cannot love your neighbor until you love yourself. You cannot express the same love you have of yourself as part of God, as part of the whole of existence, of nature, of source, of being. Until you can't express that and show that to a neighbor or even to an enemy until you know it. You see, and your enemy is never a man. That's the interesting part. Your enemy is always fiction. Your enemy is always the title the man is operating under that makes him believe that he has a power or a right to harm you. You see, your enemy is never any man. It is only the fictions that the man believes gives him authority, power. That's your police officers, that's your judges, that's your government. The enemy is fiction. Nothing in nature is your enemy. And, if you get eaten by a frickin' tiger or whatever, a shark, the shark's not your enemy. That's just a hungry, you're killing things to eat. Why should you expect any different, right? That's not your enemy. that's just prey and predator. That's part of nature. That's part of the natural law. Laws of nature. You can't escape that. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. When a man kills you because he calls you a terrorist or some other flattering title that you're not supposed to ever respect, because he calls himself a soldier or an assassin or a general or a president that you're not supposed to respect, that is attached to his person, his status in society that you're not supposed to respect. You see, this is the problem. So your enemy it's never man. Your enemy is always the fictions that man believes are true. False truth. The same false truth that gets passed around all over the truth movement. Now again, I hate to tell you this, my friends, but we're all suffering from this. We're all in this together. We have all been pirated. Our lands, our family arms, and the lands and estates, the inheritances that we might have been virtually stolen from us. This is the very purpose of birth certification, the creation of a legal entity as property of government in which, when we act, and confirm, we lose all rights. Now this brings us to this final concept I wanted to talk about real quick, which is, how is it that we show up into court someday and say, I am this person. I am this fictional character. I'm appearing as a fiction in a fictional jurisdiction, which you call your court. Court of a king, of course. And the judge sits up there on the bench, right? Another word for bench is bank. There's really not much difference between the judicial and the banking. Let's see. So let's real quick here cover what confirmation, because this is at least the most or second most important thing that you can ever understand about what it is. This is why you're in the predicament you're in. This is why you're a slave voluntarily instead of under force. Here it goes. See if I can do this in just a couple minutes here. Basically, you're being legalized. You're something that's lawful, and you're being turned into something that's legal. In other words, legalized, the act of making something legal or lawful according to that system, to confirm or validate what was before void or unlawful, to add sanction and authority of law to that which was before without or against law. That is what you are to the legal system when you are in nature of God, following only the law of God. You're illegal. You don't exist. You can't be recognized. This is why you have to appear in person. So the birth certificate is created, and as a child, we go through the concept of confirmation of that. In other words, we start acting as the person. In contracts or conveyancing is a contract by which that which was voidable is made unavoidable. Firm and unavoidable. In other words, we start using the name. We go to school, we go to the doctor, we get our Social Security, we get a bank account, we get a driver's license. We use this name over and over and over. We're the registered name of Caesar, and therefore that legal entity, which when it was created had nothing to do with you, but as soon as you started using it, it was voidable. Now it's unavoidable because now you've started executing the contract, right? That is confirmation. That is the process we go through until adulthood, where we're at the age of consent. We're now confirmed U.S. citizens. We cannot deny it because we have debts, obligations, we have Social Security, we have all these things that prove and show signs of our identity, legal identity. I think that's about all the time we got. This has been Red Pill Sunday School. I thank you for joining me. We'll be back next week, or I will. Me and my many personalities, I guess. And you're listening to UCY TV. Again, I want to thank everybody for all their generosity and for listening. And God, I hope that this has made sense today. Go to my book. Just type in confirmation space and a dash. It'll bring up the confirmation part. 581 is the page. Start reading that and do not stop. Read it over and over until you understand it, because an infant is said to confirm his acts performed during infancy, which is all the way up to 18, when, after coming to full age, he expressly approves of them or does acts from which such confirmation may be implied. In other words, we become the citizen. We use it, and we're confirming the acts performed during our infancy by continuing to use it. Whereas before, in infancy, it was avoidable. It's no longer voidable or it's no longer unavoidable once we use it in adulthood, which is legalized adultery. Again, thank you. Take care. We'll see you next week.